Hi there, my name's Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to share with you a quick, easy layer cake project. Now this batch of 10-inch squares has come from yardage I cut myself, yardage I found at thrift stores, and some pre-packaged 10-inch squares. I noticed I had quite a few black and white fabrics, and I decided to pair those up with my colors. I am stacking up 6 of these 10-inch squares, alternating colors. You can stack these up as high as you feel comfortable cutting them, but just use an even number of squares. If you've ever played tic-tac-toe on a piece of paper, that's exactly how I am cutting these squares. I'm cutting 4 lines. 2 of them are going vertically, and they are not parallel with each other. And then 2 of the lines will be going horizontally, and they will not be parallel with each other. On this stack of pieces and parts, I am alternating by taking one piece of fabric from the top and placing it at the bottom of the stack every other piece of this 9 patch. Now that it's all laid out, I am moving these pieces over to the side, and I'm going to make a new stack and keep on cutting until I have the amount that I want. For my small quilt, I'm using 18 of the black and white fabric and 18 of the color fabric. You can make this as big or as small as you want to. You can use any size square to start with. With everything cut out, I moved all those stacks back to the area next to my sewing machine. And just like any other 9 patch, I'm going to start by sewing the first 2 blocks of row 1 together, then I'll add that 3rd block, then I'll do the same thing with row 2 and 3, then I'll join all the rows together. Because I have all these stacked up together, I'm going to be able to chain piece. Once that first round was done, I started separating this chain. Then I went through and added that 3rd block to the end of row 1. Since our cuts on various stacks are all different, it's very important to keep these chains in the exact order in which you stitch them. Now it's time to go through this stack again. This time we're adding that 3rd piece to the end of row 1. And once again, we're going to separate all those chains. Then we're going to set row 1 aside and start on row 2, and then we'll do row 3. And remember, it is still important to keep these chains in the exact order in which they were stitched. Well, now it's time to start putting these rows together. Ordinarily, when you're putting a 9 patch together, you are going to be matching up some seams, at least 2 seams per row of your 9 patch. However, these blocks are wonky. We did not build in any seam allowance when we made our cuts. Therefore, these seams are not going to match. Now, I did make a sample where I did try to match that first seam of the 9 patch. You cannot match the second seam if you do that, just because of the way it's cut. Like I said, we're not giving any seam allowance as we made these cuts. It just doesn't work. And here's a little look at what you might get if you try to match up these seams. The way that worked best for me on these rows, putting them together, I just matched up the beginning. I put in a couple of stitches, and then I matched up the end, and then finished stitching the seam. Well, I finished getting all my row 1s put together with my row 2s. I separated those chains, and then I started adding row 3. And again, we're just matching the fabric at the beginning and the end and stitching it and not worrying about where those 2 seams in the middle meet up, because it's very likely they won't. I took a little bit of time to count up how many green, how many blue, and how many red I had. And then I pondered a little bit on what I was going to do, how I was going to lay this out. And if you watch my channel, you know one of my standbys is diagonal. I drew out a 6x6 grid, I got out my colored pencils and I colored it in, and then I used that for my cheat sheet as I put these blocks together into quilt rows. After pressing all my blocks flat, I did a little check to see how I should trim these blocks, and after checking, I decided to trim all my blocks to 8 3/4 inches squared. I'm using a 12.5 inch square ruler, and I'm trimming off the right hand side and the top side. I'm making sure my left and my bottom sides do overlap 8 3/4 inches. Once those 2 sides are trimmed, I can flip my block the opposite way. I can line up those 2 straight edges on the lines on my ruler that are 8 3/4 inches, and then trim the other 2 sides of the block. Now this is similar to putting my 9 patch together in the first place, except my rows are going to be 6 blocks wide. I've got my little color key there, so I will pick the right colors to put together. I decided that rather than chain piece, I would do 1 row at a time. I figured with the color coding it was already complicated enough. So when I got the first pairs sewn together, then I stitched the pair of 1 and 2 together with 3 and 4, and then last I added on 5 and 6 to complete row 1. I decided with my color chart there I would go ahead and try and chain piece in the exact order from left to right, top to bottom, and you can see as I go I'm marking on my little color chart that I have completed a pair. Once I had all those pairs done, I started actually putting rows together using 3 pairs, and what you'll see is I'm drawing a double line as I get each row complete. With all 6 rows done, it was time to put them together, and I started with the bottom 2, row 5 and row 6, and I put those right sides together, and I'm using my clips to clip on the seams between blocks. So those are the only place that I really need to match up. Nothing else is going to match. Next, I put rows 3 and 4 together the same way. Then I put 3 and 4 together with 5 and 6. Last, I stitched together row 1 and row 2. As I clipped together row 1 and 2 with the rest of the quilt, I'm using a lot more clips. That's because the bigger the quilt gets, the heavier it gets, and the more likely it is to wiggle around on you. So I like to use a lot more clips when I do the heavy part of the quilt. And putting those last bits together, we are all done with our quilt top. This is a great and fast baby quilt size. I put this together in just a little over 4 hours. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you back again real soon.